So the teases have already begun when it comes to Slammiversary this year by Impact Wrestling, but we've got some new updated former WWE Superstars, former Impact Wrestling stars, and some new big names teased by Impact Wrestling for Slammiversary in July. One name being none other than former WWE World Heavyweight Champion himself, Daniel Bryan, has been teased this week by Impact Wrestling to be showing up at Slammiversary. Now, don't worry, I will get into at least my thoughts and opinions on how accurate I think that is or isn't, but there are a ton of other names that actually are possible, and there is a ton of Impact Wrestling news. I must stress before I get into this, there is a ton of Impact Wrestling news to get into today. There's a lot of breaking stories. So let's start off with this. Let's talk about the teasing of the likes of Daniel Bryan, the Iconics, the Forgotten Sons, and more for Slammiversary in July. Now, Impact Wrestling has teased the arrival of former WWE Superstars Daniel Bryan, the Iconics, of course, Peyton Royce and Billy Kay, and the Forgotten Sons, Wesley Blake and Steve Cutler, in a new promo for Slammiversary that was shown last night on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. Now, this comes on top of last month, where Impact Wrestling released a similar promo featuring quick glimpses of recently released WWE stars such as Samoa Joe, Chelsea Green, Mickie James, three names, of course, that do have former past with Impact Wrestling. Now, the new promo is just an updated version of this, but with additional text such as Yes, Bullet Club, Forgotten, and the two eyes for the Iconics. Now, these ads are, of course, very similar to last year, and it's the same marketing strategy in what Impact implemented last year heading into Slammiversary, coming on the back of the WWE releases that were in April of last year, right after WrestleMania, the same day, a year to the day that they were released last year. Now, last year, of course, the Slammiversary promo featured the likes of Eric Young, who did return to the company, who is now still part of the Impact Wrestling roster, Luke Gallows, who did return to the company, now part of the Impact Wrestling roster, Kyle Anderson, who did sign with Impact Wrestling, part of the roster right now, Kurt Hawkins, who, of course, Brian Myers, is now part of the Impact Wrestling roster right now, EC3, who did return briefly, now he's with Ring of Honor, but he did return at Slammiversary last year, Drake Maverick, who, of course, was released by WWE last year, but was eventually rehired, now competes on the NXT brand, and Mike and Maria Kanellis, who are now signed to Ring of Honor too. These were all names that were released by WWE as part of the COVID-19 cuts. As I mentioned, Drake Maverick was the only name who did return to WWE. Now, when it comes to Daniel Bryan, of course, Daniel Bryan hasn't been seen on WWE television since losing to Roman Reigns on the April 30th edition of SmackDown in the main event for the Universal Championship. As part of the stipulation for that match, if he lost, he was banned from SmackDown. In reality, his contract with the WWE has expired. He's a free agent. As far as we're aware right now, he hasn't signed a new deal. He hasn't signed a new contract. The expectation is that he will probably go back to WWE in the future, but at the moment he's trying to figure out what he wants his future to look like. Does he want to return as a part-time star? Does he want to have a reduced schedule? Is he willing to entertain offers from the likes of AEW or even Impact Wrestling? Who knows? Now, Bryan hasn't even commented publicly on his future, his plans, his situation. I don't expect him to be honest. I would expect that we will find out about Daniel Bryan's future whenever he shows up on SmackDown or on a pay-per-view, whether he shows up on Slammiversary for Impact Wrestling. Or, to be honest, he could show up at an Impact Wrestling event tomorrow if he wanted to. He's a free agent. He has no non-compete clause that you're bound to when you're released from your contract. He could show up at Double or Nothing at the end of the month for AEW. Personally, I think he goes back to WWE. That's the mindset I've had for a while when it comes to Daniel Bryan. But look, anything is possible. Now, it must be stated as well, this isn't just a WWE thing, because as you could see on the image there on the right-hand side of the screen, a Bullet Club logo was shown, and that has maybe teased more stars from New Japan Pro Wrestling coming over. Of course, Impact Wrestling does have a very good working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling. The now former, we'll touch on that in another video, probably today or tomorrow, so stay tuned for that one. But the former Impact World Tag Team Champions, Juice Robinson and David Finlay, are New Japan Pro Wrestling contracted talents. We've seen the likes of El Fantasmo also wrestle for Impact Wrestling over the course of the last few weeks. Kojima is coming to Impact Wrestling. We're going to be talking about that in another video. I wasn't lying when I say there is a ton of Impact Wrestling news at the moment. So it's possible that people from the Bullet Club do come over as well, because also in the prior Slammiversary vignette that I spoke about, that one did actually show some images of some New Japan Pro Wrestling talent that have appeared in Impact Wrestling in the past. Names like Okada and Naito were shown in that. The Great Muta was also shown in it as well. So there are a lot of moving parts here. Now, let's break it down. Let's break it down as to the names here. Do I think that Daniel Bryan is going to sign for Impact Wrestling? Do I think that Daniel Bryan is going to appear at Slammiversary? I would be really surprised. I've got to be honest. I would be flabbergasted if Daniel Bryan did indeed sign for Impact Wrestling. I just don't see it. I really just don't see it. Not because Daniel Bryan, that's not something that he wouldn't do, or he's not a fan or anything like that. Daniel Bryan's very much his own man. And I don't think the fact that Impact's a smaller company or a company with less exposure, and I don't even think the money really matters to Daniel Bryan that much. I think the reason that I've always felt that Daniel Bryan would eventually go back to WWE, and I still do think it's the case, is because, for better or for worse, he's got a very strong relationship with WWE, specifically Vince McMahon. He's been through a lot there, Daniel Bryan, and he's worked very, very hard to get where he is in the organization. And look, Daniel Bryan, the irony is that prior to WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan was doing a ton of media. And the majority of that media was obviously for WrestleMania, but also he was talking a lot and really openly about his contractual situation, his future. And now that his contract has expired, we're hearing nothing from him. So obviously he's weighing a lot up. But during those interviews that he did prior to WrestleMania as part of the press tour before WrestleMania, he was really honest in terms of how well he thinks WWE has treated him. And that's, for me, is the main reason I think he stays with WWE, or resigns rather, is because, he knows that WWE is probably his home from home. He realizes that, the Vince McMahon and Triple H and all of the executives in that company have treated him and his family very, very well. They've made him very wealthy. They've made his family very comfortable. Of course, they still do have ties with Brie Bella, and in addition to all of her outside interests. And I think he has a good business working relationship with Vince McMahon. It's been widely reported as well that Vince McMahon is a big fan of Daniel Bryan, not just in the ring, but as a person and backstage. There's been reports that when Daniel Bryan does eventually decide to call it a day and retire, he's got a job waiting for him backstage for WWE on the creative team or whatever he wants to do. There have been rumors, and it's more than rumors, to be honest, because we've seen him on a couple of WWE documentary 24 specials, that Daniel Bryan attends production meetings. There have been reports that he does help with the creative of SmackDown. He certainly pitches ideas for people on that brand. He pitches ideas for himself as well. It's a similar situation with Edge. So Daniel Bryan is not only very well liked by the talent, but he's also very well liked by the senior executives in that company. And I just don't know if Daniel Bryan would be willing to throw all of that away to go to an AEW or an Impact Wrestling. Now, obviously, he could, and the options are there. I just think if I was going to, I'm not really a gambling man, I must say, but if I was, and you told me, Owen, you've got to put your money on where do you think Daniel Bryan's going, I think he'll stay with WWE. I do. I think the loyalty's there. I think he's just trying to discover, not just trying to negotiate. This is obviously is negotiations, but I just think he's trying to figure out, okay, I don't want to stop wrestling. I love it too much. But in the same vein, I want to spend more time with my family. And it's not very often you're in this position of power. It really isn't. It's not often you're in this position of power where you can kind of get what you want. It's maybe not the best way to describe it, but you can negotiate and you can get what is the best deal for yourself and your family. And you don't have that position of power that often. And I think he's just trying to figure out what he wants, but specifically from WWE. I think he wants to go to WWE and say, look, I want to stay here. I want to work for you. I like it here. I like working for you, Vince McMahon. You treat me and my family very well. You have for a real long time. But if I am going to work here, this is what I want. I don't want to work 12 months out of the year. And I know we're going back to touring, and I can't make every single day. Physically, I can't, but also I want to spend time with my family. And I can be available to you 9 months out of the year, but I want 3 months off. And if he can get that, then I think he'll stay. It's just a case of whether he can get that or not. Had this been 5 or 6 years ago, I think most superstars would struggle to get that. Things have changed. The pandemic fundamentally has changed so many aspects of professional wrestling, so many aspects. The thing that Vince McMahon will know, because there is increased competition now, the thing that Vince McMahon will know is that if Daniel Bryan can't get that in WWE, or he doesn't give that to Daniel Bryan in WWE, what Daniel Bryan wants, he will get that in AEW or in Impact or in Japan or for Ring of Honor or for whoever. They'll be desperate to have him. You keep telling me that Impact Wrestling wouldn't want Daniel Bryan in their company? Of course they would. He's one of the biggest stars in the world, one of the best wrestlers of this generation, arguably one of the best wrestlers of all time. He just main evented WrestleMania as well, so he's hot at the moment. He's a real valuable asset to any company, especially right now. So Vince McMahon knows we can't afford to lose that, because he'll go to AEW, he'll get over, he'll make them money. He'll go to Impact, he'll get over, he'll make them money. And Vince McMahon doesn't want that. Well, ultimately, what he cares about is money the most. And he realizes that Daniel Bryan can make him money. So I think Daniel Bryan goes back to WWE, but this is Impact being Impact. Now, as far as some of the other names that were teased in this, the Forgotten Sons, I could absolutely see that. I've been saying ever since Steve Cutler was fired by WWE that I felt that Impact was the most likely destination for him. I don't see him going to AEW. I don't see where he would fit in on that roster. It's a crowded roster. I know they're getting the Friday show, Rampage, and I know they've got Dark Elevation and Dark, and people could say, well, he could go on those shows. He could. Is that really what's best for him? I would think that he wants to stand out of the pack. I don't think he does that in AEW. I don't think he's big enough of a name, even coming off of WWE television. I don't think so. You also have to factor in his partner is Deonna Purrazzo. I know every time I bring this kind of stuff up, people go, well, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. It's not that it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. That means that their partner has inroads to that company. It's the same with Matt Cardona and Chelsea Green. And again, the Chelsea Green Impact story. That's a story that we're going to talk about later as well. So I always felt that he would come into Impact, and obviously now that his tag team partner's released, I think it makes a lot of sense. We've spoken quite a lot about the tag team scene in Impact Wrestling recently, in that it was kind of decimated a bit last year because a lot of tag teams broke up and split up, and they're trying to find the way to rebuild that. They've had to bring in some New Japan stars to do that as well. Do the Forgotten Sons come in and become Impact Tag Team Champions? Maybe not immediately, but I think Impact needs teams, and I think the Forgotten Sons are a great team to bring in. So I really wouldn't be surprised. I think that one's quite likely, actually, to be honest. Now, when it comes to the Iconics, I've said ever since Billy Kay and Peyton Royce were released, I think the Iconics, if you're Impact Wrestling, they have to be right at the top of the priority list, for me. I know people will say Samoa Joe, and obviously Samoa Joe, huge star, and if Impact could pull that off, it'd be a massive coup for them to pull that off. I think AEW will win that race. Time will only tell. For me, if I was Impact Wrestling, I would say, look, the Iconics, they're right up there. They're right up there for a name that Impact Wrestling should be looking at, because they're the only other promotion right now in North America that's got female tag team championships. And it's a new division. I know they revived it and they brought it back from the 2000s, but I've praised Impact, to be honest, for their booking of their Knockouts tag team division, because I think it's been very good. I think it's been very good. I think they're obviously having Fire and Flavor win the inaugural tournament to become the champions, drop it to Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering, win it back recently. I think they're making tag teams with Taylor Wilde and Tenille Dashwood. I think that's... like I said, but bringing someone in like the Iconics, who are former women's tag team champions in WWE, by the way, but they are an established female tag team. Everyone knows them for being a double act. Everyone knows them for being a tag team. And if they come in, I'd bring them in. I'd put the belts on them right away, and they can carry that division. They can establish that division. And if you're a wrestler, especially these two wrestlers coming out of WWE, they're going to have chips on their shoulders because they did get fired. And you're going to say to them, look, we're bringing you in not only to possibly become Knockouts champions in the future in a single sense, but we've got this new division. We've got the Knockouts Tag Team Championships. We want to make it work. We are committed to make female tag team wrestling work. We want it to be better than WWE. And we want to prove ourselves to be one of the best places for female wrestling in the world. But we also want to prove ourselves to be one of the best places for female tag team wrestling in the world. We are putting that pressure, that burden on you. We want you to carry the Knockouts Tag Team division into the future and prove not only were you too good to be released by WWE, but you have just elevated and established this Knockouts Tag Team division. What a job. What a job. And I think as two athletes, two stars that did just get released, they would take that in their stride and go, we are going to prove the WWE wrong, and we are going to own this division, and we are going to put the Knockouts Tag Team division on the map, and we're going to have everyone saying, look, if you're interested in female wrestling, you go to Impact Wrestling because that's where they do it the best. So if I was Impact Wrestling, for me, the Iconics, it is such a no-brainer, and I do think that one is possible. Do I think that, obviously, the Shawn Spears connection in AEW, will that play into it? Possibly. Possibly. And I think that the Iconics are big enough names, even as individuals. I think they are big enough names that if they went into AEW, they would succeed. And I do think, look, I've been very critical. There's a ton of videos here on the channel. I've been very critical in the past of the AEW Women's Division because I think there were and there still are fundamental flaws in their presentation of female talent in terms of the psychology, in terms of the placement on the card, in terms of main eventing TV shows, pay-per-views, etc. This week we did see a couple of female matches on the show. I'm a huge fan of Serena Deeb. I think she is just such an in-ring general, and she does add so much to that show in terms of a fundamental great wrestler, but it comes down to presentation. But I do think that if the Iconics went to AEW, they would succeed. I just think the best place for them right now would be to go into the Impact Wrestling roster because they will be front and center. That's not to say that they wouldn't be in AEW, but I feel that if you want to make an impact, pun intended, right now, then Impact is where you would go. If you were the Iconics, I think again that does make the most sense to me, is them to go to Impact Wrestling because of the Knockouts Tag Team Championship. I think that makes total sense. So there obviously could be names on these promos that do show up, and like I said at the top of the video here, you have to look at the names that were teased last year, and a lot of people looked at those names and went, oh yeah, okay, and a lot of them did show up. Now, you have to kind of, it's almost the poker analogy, isn't it? Are Impact Wrestling bluffing this year? Are all of these names going to show up? No. All of these names aren't going to show up. As I mentioned, Daniel Bryan being put in there for me is just, it's such a red herring that it's not going to happen. You have to remember as well, this is the same company that, teased so heavily last year that the Aces and Eights were going to show up. The amount of videos I did talking about the Aces and Eights and what does that mean and plans for the Aces and Eights and all that kind of stuff, and they never showed up. And then eventually we found out the reason the Aces and Eights never showed up last year at Slammiversary or after Slammiversary or anything like that is because there were never any plans for them to show up. There were plans for the Aces and Eights to be at the TNA There's No Place Like Home event in April. That was just going to be, I think, Ken Anderson and D'Lo Brown or something like that. But there were never plans to properly bring them back. The reason they did all of those Aces and Eights teasers last year was just to get attention, was just to get people talking, and man, oh man, did it work. But now, I think a lot of these names that are showing up here on these promos are very credible. I do. Is Daniel Bryan? No. The Forgotten Sons? Yes. The Iconics? Yes. Chelsea Green? Yes. Mickie James? Yes. You know, there are names there. Samoa Joe, whilst I think AEW is the most likely destination for him, I don't think we can rule that one out. I really don't think we can rule that one out. And it comes to the Bullet Club. Like I said, the relationship with Impact and New Japan is very strong right now. It really is. And you've got Kenny Omega showing up on Impact Wrestling at the moment. So who's to say that they don't have someone from the Bullet Club show up and challenge Kenny Omega? And then we get to a point where inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, we have a New Japan Pro Wrestling talent facing off against an AEW talent for the Unified Impact World Championship. That isn't out of the realm of possibility. Also, and I don't think this is going to happen, but I mean, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship just got vacated a couple of days ago because Will Ospreay suffered a neck injury. That title is now vacant. I mean, talk about a bout collector. If AEW could pull this off, I mean, this is a tangent, but if AEW could pull it off whereby Kenny Omega becomes the IWGP Heavyweight Champion once again, talk about a bout collector. Now, that would be a major storyline. Personally, I don't know if I necessarily see that one happening, but I mean, who knows? Especially during a pandemic where the flight between the countries is so difficult now, especially with the outbreaks in Japan. But talk about a storyline that would be. That would certainly have a lot of people talking. I don't know if that happens. And I mean, we're kind of getting off topic there when it comes to Slammiversary. But I guess bringing it back to New Japan, do I see people like Okada and Naito coming in the future? You know, a couple of weeks ago, I would have said I do. I do see that as a possibility. My only concern right now would be the outbreak in Japan. I know that obviously, as I mentioned, it's not impossible to travel between America and Japan. Stars are doing it, but I think it was Fit Finlay was in an interview the other day with JBL and Jerry Briscoe, and he was saying about his son David Finlay sort of being stuck in a dojo and having to quarantine for 10 days, and same with Jay White and all that kind of stuff. And now I don't know whether it's a case of, you know, some of these New Japan stars come over into the United States just because it's an ability for them to work, because a lot of the shows are getting postponed in Japan and kind of riding it out. I don't know. So I don't think it's impossible. I don't know if it's as likely as names like, you know, the Iconics, Samoa Joe, the Forgotten Sons, that kind of stuff. But It's a really interesting time, and this is it's the same as last year. Last year was really exciting, and people were fascinated to see who was going to show up, and this year's exactly the same. In fact, it might be even better. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact teasing the likes of Daniel Bryan, the Iconics, the Forgotten Sons, the Bullet Club, and other names for the Slammiversary latest teaser? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.